trans fats do not exist on their own. Trans fats are found on our foods. Trans fats are found in the oils that we use to cook the foods and all that. And the link is that when you use oil, these cooking oils that contain trans fat, then it means the oil clogs in your heart, and then that causes, a lot of complication in terms of the movement of blood around your heart, and that is linked to a lot of a number of cardiovascular diseases.
Cancer, diabetes, obesity, hypertension, and asthma are all examples of non-communicable diseases, and sadly, these diseases are the leading cause of death globally. But do they really affect us here in Africa? And are Africans really living with these diseases? Find out here at the African NCD Champions Podcast as we share incredible stories of Africans living with non-communicable diseases. My name is Ogweno Stephen, and I'll be your host. Let's roll! Welcome to yet another episode on the African NCD Champions Podcast. And in this podcast, we talk about non-communicable diseases, how to treat them, how to prevent them, and looking at non-communicable diseases and contemporary issues. Today, we have a topic that we have been working on for a very long time called trans fats. And trans fats and its effects and connections with non-communicable diseases. And without further ado, let's jump to the very first question of what are trans fats and why should we be concerned about trans fats as a topic?
Okay, well, I think this is a very important topic also to talk about. Trans fats, really the definition of trans fat, we call them partially hydrogenated oils. These are oils that, while they're naturally occurring in some ruminants, but they're also things that are man-made also. And trans fats are those oils that we call them the bad oils. And they lower what we call the low density lipoprotein, and that is the bad cholesterol, and the high density lipoprotein, which is the good cholesterol. So trans fat is responsible for that, but I think the definition is what you're looking for is really, we call it the bad oils, which are sometimes come through or are produced through this process called hydrogenation. So hydrogenation is really what manufacturers do to oils to make them more, last longer. So they pump hydrogen into those oils so that they last longer. There's economic aspect of it and the reason why they do that. But the unintended consequence of this is that there are also cardiovascular health conditions that result from these things. So I think that is what I can talk about as we have this discussion around trans fats.
Yeah, and I think that's a good place to pick it up from. Literally trans fats, or as they are called in normal language, the bad oils. These are oils that are mostly hydrogenated, and how they present in their physical form is they're mostly solid, because the additional hydrogen bond that has been passed through the oil makes the oil to solidify. Yeah, which leads us to another part of the conversation which you actually started, which I'll continue a bit and then come back to you, which is once this oil has solidified and it has been put in different foods and individuals consume the oil, it clogs the blood vessels, because this is now solid oil. So it leads to a clogging of the blood vessels, and when it clogs the blood vessels, then it leads to high blood pressure. It leads to atherosclerosis, which is literally just clogged up blood vessels. And it can lead to the development of many heart diseases and other diseases as well. So I think the next part of this question is just expounding on the linkage between trans fats and ill health I think that is where I want us to move into before we move into the next part, which will be looking at trans fats and policies. So what is the linkage between trans fats and ill health? And then I'll come back on that topic as well, even as we move to the next bit. So maybe let's start from there.
Yeah, I think it's really what you started talking about, linking these trans fats, so we call them TFAs, or industrially produced trans fats, so they can also be called trans fatty acids, or industrial trans fatty acids. That's the ITFA abbreviation of it. And really, trans fats do not exist on their own. Trans fats are found on our foods, trans fats are found in the oils that we use to cook the foods and all that. And the link is that when you use oil, these cooking oils that contain trans fat, then it means the oil clogs in your heart, and then that causes a lot of complication in terms of the movement of blood around your heart, and that is linked to a number of cardiovascular diseases. We have the coronary heart diseases, we have the ischemic heart diseases, and these are really medical terms, and sometimes might not, a layman might not really be conversant with, but the connection is clear that yes, it causes heart diseases, which are very many, even the heart attack, and things to do with even the cardiac arrest as a result of really trans fat contributing to it. But I also want to mention that trans fat, looking at in terms of statistics, WHO, according to the WHO statistics, over 540,000 people die as a result of cardiovascular death are as a result or attributable to non-communicable disease. So really there's a link between that, and these are evidence from empirical studies really showing that the number of people, certain amount of people are dying as a result of these trans fats clogging the heart and all that.
Yeah, so I think another thing just in line with trans fats and its implication on ill health, besides leading up to cardiovascular diseases, it could also lead up to stroke, because when the trans fats clog up the blood vessels in the brain, and then there is not sufficient supply of oxygen and blood in the brain, it could lead to stroke, which is also another effect of trans fats. It could lead also to obesity, which is something we've discussed in detail in a former episode, and generally, trans fats is also categorized under poor nutrition, and a lot of the foods prepared with trans fats kill off the nutritional value of the food, leading up to development of other non-communicable diseases as well. I think now I'd like to briefly mention some of the places where trans fats are found in our day-to-day interactions. They are found in the donuts that we buy. They are found in a lot of the baked products that we find. Margarine. They are found in some types of oils, some types of cooking oils that are mostly solid at room temperature or semi-solid at room temperatures. In the fries, in the crisps, in the popcorns that are oil fried. A lot of the products in the supermarket shelves that are fried with trans fats. But also there is interesting places where trans fats are found. Trans fats are found in creamers of milk. They're found in canned beans, for example. And these are areas that you wouldn't normally think that trans fats should be found, but manufacturers have also found very clever ways of putting trans fats in a lot of foods because of the economic value of improving the shelf life when it comes to the food products, because primarily their interest is making profit. And so this brings me to
before you come there, I think it's good for us to talk about really, of course that is a conversation that you've already started, why manufacturers, is it deliberate? Adding trans fat deliberately, or adding hydrogen, or pumping hydrogen to the oils deliberately, or what are really the arguments for them in terms of, so just enumerating that. I think the first one you have mentioned is increasing the shelf life of these oils. Really, from a consumer's point of view, it could be like, yeah, this is good. That yes, it's going to increase its shelf life, and also in terms of when it's hydrogenated, or you pump hydrogen, then it reduces what we call rancidity. So that oil is able to stay and all that, and you can use it over and over again. And you see women who are frying fish or whatever, deep frying the fish, like to use this oil, and that's why you're wondering why. I mean, the same oil is used over and over again. It's not really disappearing and all that. So from the consumer point of view, this might really make sense for them. And if you use that as a selling point, then this consumer can actually see that these are all they need to use. But again, also the reason why these people add, the manufacturers want to add hydrogen, is really also again to just keep them at also the temperature they want to maintain. And for example, if it's at room temperature, they want it to be, if they want oil to, the cooking oil to be maybe solid at room temperature. So it depends on what really they want to achieve. If they want to ensure that you have a cooking fat, because that's what sometimes you refer to, then it's going to be solid at room temperature. So giving you really varieties of what you can choose from. I don't know what you may want to
add on that. The overriding goal when you're looking at these industries and what their motivation is at the bottom of it all is to make profits. They are not primarily interested with your health and wellness per se. They are primarily interested with making profits. So when you're enumerating those reasons, that is one of the overriding factors that presents itself as the reason why the industry players would be very keen on increasing or hydrogenating oil to ensure that they are converted to trans fats, and as a result maximize on their profits. So, interesting conversation around policy. What is happening in the policy space, especially in the East African, we'll start from globally and then move into the East African space as it comes to trans fat. So maybe you can do the global piece first, and then we'll move it to the next part.
I think in terms of what is going on around trans fat, this is effort that is being spearheaded by the WHO. I think in this episode we have been so much referring to WHO, and because WHO really gives guideline in terms of how every health aspect should be approached. But now what WHO has done in terms of providing leadership in terms of eliminating trans fat is to come up with the technical packages. And the technical packages really include the replace package, which really contains actionable strategies for eliminating trans fat. And what WHO expects is that by using this, this technical package, it has, countries around the world can be able to, tap into really this strategy to build or come up with best practices around trans fat, and even also come up with a slew of initiatives or policy initiatives that can eliminate altogether this trans fat. So there's a lot of work going at the WHO level, it's the global level, but also regionally. CSOs coming strong and up in arms against the government, or challenging the government to be concerned about cardiovascular health outcomes of the general population, and ask them, can we enact policies, the best practices are there, or asking, looking at what WHO was proposing as, limiting trans fat to not more than 2 grams. So I think this is what is happening currently, and I mean, a few countries really have done good work. And the other day, the WHO rewarded 5 countries for their best practices and really coming up with policies around trans fats. And interestingly, 2023 was also the year in which WHO projected that they could deal away with trans fats. I don't know whether WHO was being overambitious and just giving it 5 years. They started in 2018, and that's when they came up with the technical package. So in terms of how that would have built into, because again, it was not mandatory for countries to build on this technical or utilize this technical package. Is also not mandatory for them to do that. So that's why we are seeing a lot of gaps in this lacuna in terms of countries coming up to enact policies around that. And you might want to also refer to the work that we are doing together with the International Institute for Legislative Affairs, together with other organizations like the TAWLA from Tanzania, the UNHCO in Uganda. Really, these are organizations that have stepped in the fight to or petition governments across East Africa to enact enact policies, and this is really an effort that we have led, and we are grateful for the work that we have done towards having regional and regulations or national regulations to limit trans fats and improve cardiovascular health outcomes.
Yeah, sure thing. And I think I'd want to expound a little bit more and give some context about what work has been happening from us, me, yourself, and also working together with the International Institute of Legislative Affairs and their local partners across different countries, really spearheading for a regional policy implementation on trans fats, and moving very strongly from just offering suggestive language to really advocating for a more regionally sound intervention on the side of policy to really ensure that we have clear-cut, direct policies, guidelines, and recommendations on trans fats. Now, regionally, we are seeing that a lot of the governments in the East African Union, and I'd even mentioned Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania as examples, do not really have stringent laws or policies on trans fats. And in fact, when you're talking about the WHO provision, these countries just took it as a suggestion. And even in the policy implementation, it was just put as something that is not very clear, just a mention of it. And the work that has been happening between the International Institute of Legislative Affairs, TAWLA, and UNHCHO in Uganda has really gone to convert this suggestion, this blurry area of trans fats into a more concrete, more distinct policy items to ensure that really we have a point of reference for which we can begin to have action from. Because whilst it's still a suggestion, we can't really advocate for the push to get these components implemented. And I think a lot of the work has gone now to ensure that policy briefs have been developed, a lot of advocacy has happened and continues to happen, and we continue to lead the digital advocacy, but also some research aspects in really producing evidence to convey to the various policymakers at the national level and also at the international level, looking at the different countries in the East African region to really implement a regional-based policy framework on trans fats. I think this has interesting benefits, not only for the countries that are engaged, but also for the region in general. And I'd give you the first take to talk us to about some maybe one or two regional benefits that might arise if the efforts that are being made at the moment actually come to pass.
I think, as I always mention, I mean, this again for me is a no-brainer in terms of what we can really achieve, and if we really harness our efforts to enact transfer policies, the benefit that we can accrue both in the short term, one is the reduction in the number of cardiovascular diseases, or I mean these conditions that we are grappling with. But again, in the long term, it saves, I mean, a lot of money. And really, I think the NCD, the Global NCD Alliance, has developed a best buy where if you invest $1, it gives you what in return?
That's $8.
8 or 7 in return. So I think if we come up with these policies, the efforts that we are putting forth, I think is going to also help us to sidestep these catastrophic healthcare costs that come with us developing these diseases. But again, also it's achieving a more prosperous nation or more prosperous countries. One, it's because we go back to when you're healthy, you are productive. When you're healthy, you're able to produce wealth. And so countries that really invest in the health of the citizens are able to also be very, very productive, because these are people who are able to be productive and also work, and they're very active. So 3 things I think will accrue if we sustain this effort around transfer regulation is, one, we are able to now see a decline or a gradual decline in the number of cardiovascular diseases, but also us being able to have a prosperous nation. Not prosperous in terms of, amount of money you can make, but even the individuals are very prosperous in terms of their physical health outcomes, but also saving us the cost that we would otherwise, have to spend on cardiovascular. You can spend them on some priority or development priorities. Yeah.
I think I want to add 3 more on top of that, and one is generally an increase in food variety. A lot of the foods now have been very standardized because they are cooked the same way, and of course because trans fats will keep them in the shelves for up to 1, 2, 3 months on end. But when trans fats begins to get regulated, we might see, and we've seen in the countries where this has been regulated, that there's an increase in food variety. In essence, also there's an increase in local consumption of healthy food, and as we said, it helps to reduce not only cardiovascular diseases, which is the direct attribution, but the indirect attribution is on all the other conditions that are avoided or controlled because individuals are much more healthy. And then I think the third level is policies implemented at a regional level can now lead to a massive change at the local level at the same time, ensuring that there is a massive improvement in health and wellness if these policies are now adopted and implemented at the local level. Now, finally, I think we'd want to also really talk about the role of youth and the role of young people in the fight against trans fats and in the fight to bring trans fats into policy and really help in eliminating trans fats or bring them to where they are at best practice. So maybe mention a few of what the role of the young people might be, and then I'll come back to that as I summarize this conversation.
Okay, well, I think one of the things that I want to mention is that young people really provide the critical mass that is needed to really push these voices and also just petition the government to enact these policies, recognizing that policies that are made will have long-term effects even on the lives of the young people, then mobilizing themselves to really highlight these issues. And again, government will be compelled to listen if this thing comes from young people and be like, this is something that concerns them, and it's something that concerns their future, and they're really, really, sensitized around that issue. So, one obvious role which young people can do, mobilize themselves, we mobilize ourselves and talk about this thing, because when we talk about this thing, I mean, the world is able to hear us because we have the critical mass that is needed to really champion for this, because really the strength lies in numbers. And I think in Africa, or I mean, in many countries, there's that demographic dividend that we can take advantage of and be able to push those things that we want, and we have really the power to change such things. I mean, other things that we can do, I mean, innovative ways. I think the youth also are creative, and the altruism that comes with it and the agility. We can really think around what are the innovative ways, and the innovative ways here, I'm not now going to suggest digital innovations, but find ways in which you can, because being creative does not only mean just coming up with an app today, another app tomorrow, but finding those creative ways in how do we approach, or even them also, even thinking around how can they also come up with ways in which these oils can be manufactured in ways that without the need for those trans fat and all that. So I think what I'm trying to say is there's a lot that young people can do, but obviously mobilize themselves to be able to petition the government, because that is a role that is when it's enshrined in the constitution of most countries, that take advantage of public participation forums where you're able to add your voice. And I know we have democratic governments, at least, I mean, from what we see, and they can be able to listen to obvious suggestions.
Yeah, I also think young people can actively contribute to the production of evidence against trans fats, evidence that could be presented to policymakers, to governments, to the regional bodies, to really ensure that we are advocating against trans fats with a point of evidence on first its effects on people, but also secondly its if eliminated, the potential benefits both health-wise, financially, and even politically. Young people are also could also be engaged as educators to educate the communities on what trans fats are and help prevent and manage these conditions. And really help the community to understand what are some of the healthier alternatives. Understand that there is things like coconut oil, there is avocado oil, there is the peanut oils, which are naturally produced, which are healthy, which can act as alternatives to the trans fats that are being produced. So young people can play that role of really educating their fellows in the communities to understand and to be able to really have knowledgeable action on trans fats and its elimination in the day-to-day life. And I think
also, sorry for cutting you short, one thing that I remembered when you're talking about the role of young people, I think what young people can also do is just to also lead efforts to boycott non-brands, to that contain TFAs. And I think this requires us to just be radical, and not in a bad way, but be radical in terms of our approach and how we can, intentionally just, lead efforts to boycott these brands that are known to contain these things. But again, also acting as, I think, community monitors, them being actively monitoring those oils, because I know in the community there might be those who do not really have understanding about what these trans fats are, or will check nutrition labeling and all that. So young people can really be the ones to lead efforts to monitor these trans fats, and whether really the manufacturers are adhering to the regulations around nutrition labeling, and also trying to talk about the trans fat amount in their oils. So I think that is something that young people can also do.
Yeah, so that sort of brings us to a good wrap up in terms of conversations on trans fats and what can be done, what they are, and your role as a young people listening to this. Eventually, they say knowledge is power and prevention is better than treatment. So we really encourage you to take up initiative to learn about trans fats, but also to go a step further and evaluate your home, evaluate your space, see how many foods that you are eating, or how many edible oils, how many processed foods that you are consuming that actually have trans fats that could lead you to develop a heart attack 10 years from now, a stroke 10 years from now, and then begin to create small but steady interventions to help you prevent, manage, and control your consumption of trans fats, even as we continue to fight on the policy front to ensure that this is more readily available for the general population. And with that, we'll see you on the next one.
Now that was incredible. Thank you for listening in. Share this with your networks and follow us on all social media at Storylink and at NCD Champions. See you on the next one.